they're losing to a team that is playing so remarkably well.
Huge, 28-3, 22 minutes in, the quickest in this series. He goes down and across the map.
They will go to the World Championships as the #1 seed.
Oh my God!
With hundreds of millions of hardcore gamers and thousands of global tournaments each year, computer games are well on their way to becoming the world's biggest sports.
This is a computer game that we are all gathered here to watch. A computer game.
And at the center of everything is a whole new breed of celebrity, the esports superstar.
I guess essentially I'm a 21-year-old who's a millionaire through gaming. Yo, I'll take it.
The best players have left their bedrooms to compete in the world's biggest stadiums. Offered up athletic visas and sports scholarships, athletes play for up to 18 hours a day in dedicated gaming houses, always under the watchful eyes of their agents and coaches. For those who work hard and keep their heads together, real fame and wealth await, with cash prizes going into the millions. But as quickly as their stars can rise, they can also come crashing down when the pressure of top-level competition proves too much to handle. With the screaming fans, the huge cash prizes, and above all, the glory, the pressure has never been this great. Welcome to the world of esports.
Wow. No round of applause? Hey, come on. Kia ora whānau, my name is Duane. So yes, I'm one of the founders, also Sky Sports presenter for esports. So I come with a little bit of credibility, but look, you look at the screaming fans, packed out stadiums, there's winners, there's losers, feels like sport. So hopefully today you guys can get some really good insight as to what it's really about. So there's probably some people in the room who are just blown away by what is this, what it's about, but Ben and myself hopefully can educate you and then obviously take you on the journey and look at opportunities that may exist with the traditional pathways. So look, the reality is esports is not new. It's been around a very long time. You know, there's a great documentary called on Donkey Kong. There's been people playing all the way through arcades. And really what it is about is it's about competitive video gaming. That's what esports stands for. But if you look at really why it's boomed, because it has exploded. And a couple of the points of why it's actually exploded is the fact that why has it gone from 1980 right through to now where it's absolutely taken off? And I put it down to a couple of key points. One is the fact that the internet speeds are faster. That's the first thing. If you look at the first generation of gaming consoles, they were just locked off to one person. Now the invent of gaming development where it's so quick, you can communicate in real time, you can play people in real time, that obviously helped it explode. And what is also driven is obviously the appeal for entertainment, to watch the spectacle, to watch the very best. And you look at platforms like Twitch. How many people in the room actually know what Twitch is? Okay, so Twitch is the biggest live streaming platform on the planet. So right now you should be jumping on, having a look at this. This is the biggest thing in the world right now. And it's come from 2011 to 2014, sold to Amazon for $1 billion. And now there's 666 million people watching video game content, which is bigger than Netflix, ESPN, and Hulu combined. So we're talking about a future right now that's driven, and most of the people in the room do not know what that is. So it's something that's your homework for tonight, or at least jump on your Twitch and go, this is what it's about. So that is, I guess, in a crux what esports is, but we've got to be clear about it. For everyone in the room, you look at esports and it sounds like a swanky name. Is it sport? Isn't it sport? And we'll get to that, of course. We all have opinions on what it should and shouldn't be, but the reality of it is, look at this much more like athletics. The fact is you've got a title, it's called esports, but the reality is you've got multiple different genres of which you jump into it. So when we talk about shot put versus sprinting or 100 meters, that's what we're really talking about here. And you look up here and there's different types. So when we look at something like a MOBA, which is League of Legends, which is what you saw on that screen there, very different when you come across to the shooting genre, which features Fortnite and Call of Duty and those types of games, right through to something at the moment where there's race simulations or Street Fighter in arcade. So when you look at that, we've got to think to ourselves, okay, I like the big title esports, I might be interested in that, but really, what are you interested in? You've got to really think about those things and think about each of the niches, each of the genres, and of course, they have their own fans and nuances that go around that. So that's the quick and the short of esports.
So we're here representing really two organisations. One is the New Zealand Esports Federation, of which I'm the president. Duane is also a board member and a representative. But Duane is also a co-founder of a commercial operator called Let's Play Live, which is currently broadcasting on Sky Sport 4 days a week now, aren't you? So that's who we're representing. The New Zealand Esports Federation, we set this up because we saw a gap in the governance and regulation of esports. So I'm a lawyer, so I was asked to head this up. And we're really about creating pathways. That's our kind of motto at this stage. So creating pathways for young New Zealanders to take the step from being amateur people, maybe in a local LAN tournament or something, through to being on the world stage like you just saw in that video. And that's where we're headed with this sport.
Thank you, Ben. So Let's Play Live, we are, I guess, an esports media company. So the reason we kind of point that out is obviously, we'll pump my tyres up a little bit, but I don't need any more pumping up. It's just the fact that it shows credibility and how advanced we are, obviously, in a global landscape. And one of the great things about esports and obviously what you're able to do is you can transcend your countries very, very quickly, whether it be through broadcast, whether it be picking up video games remotely. I mean, a lot of the times we deal with both Australia and New Zealand. We have one team based in New Zealand out of our studio and then the other team based out of Australia. So you start breaking down the walls of what would be physical participation in most of the, obviously, most of the fields of which you guys are here. You start removing that, and that's where this whole kind of drive, the accessibility is very, very quick, but it's still competitive. So we'll have a quick look at, obviously, some of the stuff we've been up to.
Crowd going wild! They want their boy to win!
But this whole esport thing is absolutely blowing up overseas and of course right here in New Zealand.
Let's battle! He's gonna win this one. John's managed to get it. Oh! Whoa, slow-mo!
He goes underneath the jab with the debugger.
Ultimate Grand Final LPL styles. His name is Saint. He's one of the best players in the entire world, and he is here in New Zealand.
It is the grand final of the NBA 2K17 Championship.
We've got some established sports stars that have taken on the virtual arena in the form of Tom Abercrombie up against hardman Albert Vete from the mighty Vodafone Warriors.
What is this e-gaming? So tell someone like me who's a complete numpty at this sort of thing.
So e-gaming refers to competitive video gaming.
So there's big money in this?
The biggest prize pool to date so far was 21 million. There's a high school league at the moment that started at the start of this year. It features around about 100 schools throughout the country.
Now it's becoming a thing that if you do dedicate a lot of time to it and take it seriously, you can get somewhere with it.
I heard a few chuckles when you saw the E-Blacks. I mean, that's real. We'll get to that. We'll get to that later on. Look, one of the main reasons for obviously showing you that video is it's all very good and well. You see the big stadiums in Korea. You see it packed out. You hear about how big and obviously how big the world of esports is. But if you think about how close to home you saw, all that footage in there is actually right here in New Zealand. So we've got the theatre in Sky City. We've had around 700-800 people packed it out. Like Ben mentioned, we're on Sky TV 2 to 4 times a week. We have a high school league program, and there are, yes, the E-Blacks, which again we'll get to later on. So it is a very real thing right now, and I'm sure most people in the room just kind of going, really, is this actually happening? And then you look at the broadcast partners, the content is very, very valuable. So it's not about, okay, whether you agree or disagree, you look at the share numbers, you look at the participation levels, which we'll get to, but also the content is very valuable. When you look at the broadcast partners in which we're engaging already, this is the growth of what sport would have been early on. And you look at us going to Fox, Sky Sport, and they're always on the sport channels too. So even 7, we're looking at our motor racing, Project Cars 2, virtually racing Bathurst. They're looking to pick that up across onto Channel 7. So this content is very valuable, it is very real, and that's an important piece to be. But it's big. You know, the simple thing is it is big. So I want to show you a quick video, and then we can get into some numbers, and then we'll break it down a little bit more.
I know what you're thinking. Professional video games? Seriously? Well, yeah, this is serious business. Get that image of a soda-chugging, frozen pizza-eating geek who never leaves his bedroom out of your head. Esports is the real deal, like Evander Holyfield. Don't believe me? Doesn't matter. I got the facts to prove it. You may think it's about mashing buttons at random. No! Esports has got human reflexes fast enough to teach Usain Bolt a thing or two about getting off the blocks. It's got enough fans to make the NHL slip and slide. It's got more drama than an episode of Game of Thrones. Tell me more, tell me more. Okay, well now that I've got your attention, let me break it down for you. Huge tournaments are held all over the world with audiences of up to 113,000 people in attendance, and that's dwarfed by the online viewership, with some tournaments reaching 34 million viewers via platforms such as Twitch. Sponsors are getting involved, pouring in boatloads of cash. That's a real measurement, right? Esports is set to become a billion-dollar industry by the end of 2017, but the prize money is already turning these teenagers into multi-millionaires. So what do they play? A lot of different games. Esports is an all-encompassing term for a variety of games, from multiplayer online battle arenas, or MOBAs, like League of Legends, to first-person shooters like Counter-Strike. So where's it going, you say? Virtual reality and all those bigger, better things! So why haven't I heard of it? Because you've been living under a rock. So follow CNN's guide to awake from your slumber and get ready to join the esports generation.
I mean, he said it, I didn't say it. Who's been living under a rock? So let's have a look at the market size. Internationally, I mean, some of those numbers are outdated, but you look at 1.3 billion esports participants, and that's growing every year, you know. You're up 41.3%. The esports audience is growing each and every year, and again, it's coming back to those things, accessibility, the ease of which you can jump into it, games getting better, and obviously this competitive environment driving it all. So then we look at New Zealand, that's all good and well for an international audience, but what does it look like on our local market? This is from Gemba Independent Research. 700,000 people, esports participants last year. This year we're up to 1 million. 470,000 esports consumers, and that's up. So we're looking at a growth industry and a trajectory that's so quick. I mean, 300,000, I mean, we're a country of 4 many million. So to have almost a quarter of it, it is growing so rapidly that you need to get onto the train, as they say. So let's have a look at the live attendance, how many people are attending. So we look at something like the IEM or the Intel Extreme Masters, which was held in Sydney just recently. 173,000 people attended that in Homebush. So people are attending, people are coming out, supporting their teams, and again, it's much more like a traditional sports offering where they're cheering on their team like you saw before, supporting, buying the merchandise, F&B, and all the things that sit around what is, what you guys would understand as traditional sport. And you break that down to the numbers in the Super Rugby and NRL finals, So we're talking about like for like. This isn't something, you're not here to talk about the future is coming. I'm here to talk about the fact that the future is here. And so the reality of it is, if we look at the numbers, we look at what's happening both locally, internationally, it's actually about to say, hey, here it is, how do we engage with it? And you look at the participation rate growing every year, and some of the traditional types numbers that are sort of staying stagnant or slightly growing when we're talking about adding 300,000 people a year to become esports participants.
So here we go. Here goes the big billion-dollar question that I'd like a show of hands on. So who thinks that this is a sport? Oh, a few more than we thought. Oh, wow, okay. So presumably everyone else doesn't think it's a sport, no? It's not a sport? Okay. Fair enough. Kind of? Jury's out. Okay, well, we'll try and change your mind. Where did I go? Did I go the wrong way? Sorry.
One of the biggest debates out there is whether esports are a sport.
The action's on. It's going to be down to the last possible second. How the hell is he still alive?
When most people think about sports, they're thinking about large muscle movements, shooting a basketball or dunking a basketball or tackling somebody in football. Those are all activities that involve large muscle groups. Some people might not think that esports is a sport because it primarily involves fine motor movements. However, when you're thinking about archery and release of that bow, or you're thinking about stationary target shooting and the pull of the trigger, both of those activities are Olympic sports. Very similar movements are used in esports.
Nowadays, more than ever, it takes an athlete to compete in esport. We use the motor cortex in the same way in traditional sport and in esport. You have a visual stimuli. It's processed by the brain as a pattern that you have to learn through hours and hours of rigorous training. And then you have an automatic reflex based on what you understand from that. And you have to just instantly do it as fast as possible, which is a motor movement. The only way to code these kinds of neural changes is through volume and intensity. You have to train more and you have to train harder. There's no other way around it.
The international is the big one. If you take TI, you become immortal.
When you're watching these players play Dota 2 for millions of dollars at the international, think about how much skill is involved for them to compete at this elite level.
Hit the button. All right. So we want to take you through 4 basic areas. And a couple of things I'd like to mention from that video. They were talking about the Dota 2, the international. So this year they've just announced that the prize pool for that will be $25 million. And there's a new game came out called Fortnite, and the publisher of that has recently announced they're going to make a prize pool available of $100 million US. So that's the kind of money that people are competing for. Another good thing that I heard in the last presentation was someone mentioning Paralympians. And I guess one of the things to remember with esports is this is the great leveler. You can have someone with a severe physical disability. In fact, we have a diversity committee, and we have someone who suffers from quite bad physical disabilities. He's also deaf, and he's able to fully participate and compete in esports. The Xbox has just come out with a special controller, which has a huge variety of ways that you can interact with the console. And that can even to the point where someone can play just using their tongue. And they can still compete and have that competitive spirit if they've got it inside them. So it's all part of where esports is moving, and it's very inclusive. So we're going to take you through these 4 traditional sports alignments, the high performance part of it, and where we're going with the Olympics, the high school thing that's going on now and possibly university, and then why and how are you as NSOs going to get involved. So traditional sports meets esports.
So after you saw that video, was there more people convinced it's a sport? Still same show of hands? Or even less now, 1 more, yeah, there you go. Look, so this is the thing we hear in the media all the time. We're seeing, okay, and most of you in here have obviously had a look at this, and in some shape or form you've talked about, okay, why is it that traditional sports are jumping into esports? So we now understand that obviously the money's big, we understand the participation's big, the data sits to all of it, but there's still a why. There's a crux of why are they wanting to get involved in this, right? So you look at the big names. This is the biggest sporting brands on the planet. You're talking about NBA teams, biggest football teams. You're talking about, your F1s, your NFLs, and of course your NBA. And so when you look at that, again, the question is why. So we've got a great video. It's a little bit longer than the other one. It's about 5 minutes, but it's really worth having a listen to the commissioner of the NBA, and because they're the first major league to jump into this as a professional sport, and it will really start to give you some great insight as to why they jumped into it, and then I can fill in some of the gaps.
This is SC Featured. This is the power of sports.
What makes an athlete? Training, dedication, the sacrifice, and in 2018, a high-speed internet connection. For 102 of the NBA's newest stars, simulation has become reality. Welcome to the NBA 2K League.
It was kind of just an escape from everyday life. Growing up, I wasn't the most popular kid. I was short and chubby, unathletic, didn't fit in with any cliques. It was something really as an escape, something I could actually be good at and showcase my skills under a different alias, have different friends that weren't judgmental. We all have our aspirations to dream big and make something of our lives, but back when I was a kid, I could have never imagined something like this. It's absolutely stunning.
In February of 2017, the NBA, along with Take-Two Interactive, announced the formation of the 2K League, the first esports league sanctioned by a major professional sport.
From the NBA standpoint, this is our fourth league. We'll be welcoming a new generation of athletes. Do it.
And now, with the first pick in the 2018 NBA 2K League Draft, Mavs Gaming selects Artreo Boyd, aka Dimes, from Cleveland, Ohio.
I feel like I'm dreaming and I'm about to wake up in Cleveland, Ohio in my room.
Have fun, enjoy the moment, okay?
This is like where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. Before the league, it was still 2K. I didn't have a job. I played 2K all day, every day.
So with the second overall pick, Celtics Crossover Gaming selects OFAB. With the third overall pick, Jazz Gaming selects Yeah, I Compete. With the fourth overall pick, Kings Guard Gaming selects Moody, power forward from Virginia.
First and foremost, look, mama, we made it. Man, I didn't think it was gonna feel like this. The emotions going through, I don't really have words. Finally turning your dreams into a reality, it's just so surreal.
All drafted players will receive a salary in the range of $32,000 to $35,000, medical insurance, a retirement plan, and potentially massive tournament bonuses. But perhaps no team is better equipped to come into this league than the Sacramento Kings Guard. From a state-of-the-art gaming facility to a housing setup like their eyes have never seen before.
Where I'm coming from, man, I've never thought I'd see something like this a day in my life.
Feel like we're on top of the world, man. This like MTV Cribs. I got an MTV Crib.
Yeah, come on. Go ahead, there.
I get emotional talking about it right now because, it means the world to me, the position I'm in right now, and everything that has really fallen into place.
You got a stretch five with Moody, but you got nobody to protect the rim.
It was a tough start for the Kings Guard. They went 1-2 in the tip-off tournament that was eventually won by 76ers Gaming Club.
We have so little things to work on. It's gonna be a scary sight once we get clicking on all cylinders.
For the Kings Guard and the rest of the 2K League, it's a season and a future full of possibilities.
If you're into 2K, you want to watch. There's that same emotional connection from watching a 2K game that you can get from a Mavs game or an NBA game.
Who knew there was a NBA draft for 2K? Oh, one or two, very good. So look, you look at that and it's obviously good enough for the NBA. And again, it comes down to the why. So you look at it and think to yourself, well, the NBA, obviously one of the most powerful sporting brands on the planet. Obviously they have fantastic, reach across the globe. So why are they jumping into it? So when you look at it just purely, it makes sense from an NBA point of view. They have a game that was able to back it up in the form of 2K, and obviously they had a partnership, and you see similar things with the NFL, and you see that with FIFA as well. So there's a nice crossover there straight away. But again, if you drill a bit deeper into it, they look at it and they say, okay, some of the viewership that's coming on board and is declining as far as the millennial space. We're talking about people coming through that are sub 34, aren't tuning in and watching the NBA anymore. So they see that coming. A lot of other traditional data we see for traditional sports across the planet, same again. They're not continuing on. So the millennials are picking it up and watching video game content online, and they're not coming across to the linear broadcaster. So really what it's about is actually engaging with the millennial audience young and then bringing them across in the hope that they will then come across to the traditional space. So we've got some examples again later on why that's important. But again, if you think about that from a traditional sports standpoint, you think about an aging viewer that is plus 34. Most people in this room didn't know what Twitch was, of which most of these games are played, right? So you start to go to yourself, okay, what am I missing here? And then you look at the sheer numbers of what I was saying to you, 666 million people watching this content. It absolutely makes sense why you would want to jump into this if you're NBA. And then some of the stuff we've heard is the fact that they believe within a very short space of time, in a couple of years, that the biggest stars like, again, Glasses Man, Moody, apologies about his glasses, but he will be as big as LeBron James in that audience. And so when you look at it from those couple of drivers, you start to say to yourself, okay, that's good. And then you extend that further and say, okay, if the Cleveland Cavaliers, of which I'm a massive fan of, they are obviously on the road in Boston today. And then you think to yourself, okay, now we've got the opportunity back at home in Cleveland to have Cleveland gaming playing at that stadium. So all of a sudden you're doubling up on the opportunities from a traditional sports offering in two different spheres of which you're not actually talking to anyway. So you take that one away and you're left with what you've got at the moment. You add that one in, it starts to become much more of, okay, now I know why. That's why we go why. And the other stereotype I just want to break down very quickly before we get Ben back on here, because, you know, I'm probably talking too much, is very much around this participation. There's probably people in this room going, okay, this is kind of jarring to see too much screen time. We see it all the time. I hear it all the time when I'm in the media isn't this bad for our children? Now I'm a father too, so I coach a lot of traditional sport. I came from a traditional background. But when we look at it, the numbers don't lie. This is actually a stereotype. It's much like we see the average age of a gamer in New Zealand is 34. It's 35 in Australia. You know, we have access, both male and female, to gaming devices. So when you look at it, we're saying, is it a stereotype or is it real? Are we actually blocking them off when we're making them play video games? Now, of course, you see in those videos, to get to an elite level, which most of you guys would understand, yes, you have to put the time in. But when we're talking about overall participation, where the numbers are coming from, they're one of the same. They participate at traditional sport, and then they come back and they play video games. And if we're honest with ourselves in the room, we think about it from a parent standpoint. Again, I am one of those, a parent as well, of a couple of kids, is we've been giving our children tablets for a very long time now. The internet's about 20 years old. So this whole generation has come through on tablets. You know, we've given them the mobile phones to play a few video games. So they just understand the space better. They understand how they want to consume it. You know, the speed of internet and what they're watching, they understand that. So when they come through, they like to consume it that way. They don't like to watch it on a traditional forum like they used to, whether it be, you know, your traditional broadcasters like Sky. They move across to Twitch and watch it online. But don't be fooled. They are still participating. So this isn't a drop-off in that. It's the fact that they are playing Fortnite after they've finished rugby training or basketball training. So they're one of the same. So if we can think about that and go, okay, that's cool. How do then, we shouldn't be thinking about them as two different people. They're actually one of the same. The youth are coming through and they just are equal in the alignment. So again, hopefully that breaks down a bit of a stereotype as to what type of person we're looking at.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions here. So esports and the Olympics. So let's have a show of hands. Who thinks that esports should be in the Olympics?
Oh, tough.
Tough audience, tough audience. Who thinks that esports will be in the Olympics?
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, at least you're in touch with reality. That's great. Good, good. So we've got another little video to play for you.
Video gamers could be winning Olympic gold medals in the future. A co-president of the Paris Olympic Bid Committee told the Associated Press that France will talk to the Olympics governing body about adding esports to the 2024 Games. Right now, France is just considering esports as a possibility, but it has young viewers in mind. Professional gaming is becoming more popular in France. Last year, an audience research firm found internet users in the country are showing more interest in esports, particularly people in the 15 to 24 age range. Worldwide, market research has estimated there are 148 million esports enthusiasts. But adding esports as an actual Olympic event is much easier said than done. For starters, the International Olympic Committee still needs to recognize esports as governing body. But that doesn't guarantee anything. The IOC recognizes the governing bodies for bowling, chess, korfball, and more than 30 other sports that still aren't Olympic events. French officials have acknowledged the IOC ultimately has the final say on whether or not esports makes the cut.
So high performance is definitely one of the things. If you ask why, I guess the question is why does esports want to be in the Olympics? And I think a question that a lot of people, or a statement that a lot of people are making is, the Olympics need esports more than esports needs the Olympics. The esports are growing regardless. There was, last week, there was a final in League of Legends in China between a Chinese team and a Korean team, and the audience was 100 million people watching it online in China. So it isn't a question of why does esports need the Olympics really. But if we look at it, what is going to be what the Olympics needs to offer and what New Zealand needs to offer if we want to go down that route. And one of them is high performance training and all of that being made available to esports athletes. Now, Asia Games this year, so Asia Games are the second biggest athletic competition in the world after the Olympics. This year, esports will be a demonstration sport. In 2022, it will be a medal sport. 2024 Olympic Games, Paris is asking for it to be a demonstration sport. So 2028, who knows, 2032, we could be looking at medals being awarded to esports. And for that, there's going to need to be high performance, there's going to have to be a whole lot of stuff around it. As Duane said, the viewership is dropping in a lot of traditional sports, and people are flocking to esports. And we're going to show you later on why those two things don't necessarily have to contradict each other. There are ways the two things can work together. So far, 27 countries recognise esports as a sport. New Zealand is not one of them. So we are falling behind in that, and that's a pity because we do, I think, value ourselves as a country that is a forerunner. But right now we're really falling quite far behind a lot of other countries in recognising. And so who do we need to have that high performance for? Well, we need it for the E-Blacks, because that is going to be our national team. And yes, we have trademarked it, just in case you're wondering. So these are the E-Blacks, some of them. And so it's the international team. We sent them over to Jakarta in 2016. We sent 3 teams over, no, 2, wasn't it? A League of Legends and a Hearthstone. And to be honest, they took a bit of a hiding. We sort of cobbled it together at the last minute. We wanted to get out there and rep them. So this is the IESF World Champs that we sent them to. It's the International Esports Federation. So when they were talking in that video about recognising the governing body, that's the IESF, and the NZESF, we're a member of that organisation. So that's the pathway to the Olympics. And then last year we sent a young Korean New Zealander over to Korea, which was great. And you saw in that video there was a guy, Saint, they were talking about, who was rated as the best Tekken player in the world. So LPL brought him over to New Zealand to compete. And Cornova, who was a New Zealander, he competed against him. He did well, considering that Saint's the best in the world. We then sent, the prize was to be sent over to Korea to compete in the World Champs, and Cornova got 4th, which was amazing. So you saw him in the video walking in with a flag, New Zealand flag, over his shoulder. So he went in there and got 4th, and I was watching the video, and the guys were just like, where the hell did this guy come from? Where's New Zealand, you know? Let's go and get a map and find out where these guys are. It really, really put us on the esports map. So we're excited this year to try and get more players over there and some teams as well, we hope. This is you, yeah?
It's me again. Just a quick story on that Saint that Ben talked about. The coolest thing, because he's actually from a team that's run by Rick Fox, who's an ex-NBA legend. He's got a team called Eco Fox. Came to New Zealand, multi-million-dollar athlete, got like full custom Nikes, backpack. All the fans are like blown away, loving him. Now look, schools, what are the pathways right now when we look at esports in this local market? Schools. So we started a program that it's called HSL. You might have seen in the video earlier on. And if we have a look at these nice chaps, look at them. They're from Kia ora to the Tauranga Boys Esport Club. Looks like any other sport team. This isn't make-believe. They're literally allowed to go up there and do it. And so a couple of years back, we started with 10. And we said, look, we think there's sort of a desire here. We started with 10 schools. Now we have 119, and that's growing every term. We also broadcast every Monday night online via Twitch, and we also are on Sky Sport every Monday night. So again, very similar to what you guys would expect from a traditional output, but it's growing all the time. But one of the great things about the high school league, which we're really proud of, is the fact that some of these kids didn't have that opportunity to represent their school. You know, so we know, obviously, I was lucky enough to be able to, participate at a high level for school from a sport perspective, that's great. There's a lot of other people who weren't able to do that, and we start seeing that crossover. And also from an online bullying perspective, there's a great video just here, which before we jump into him talking about it, from Mutu High School. Mutu High School, Decile 1, obviously in South Auckland, massive on League of Legends, which is a game they play out there. It's free to play, the game, which is great. PCs they can use from the library, which again is fantastic. We put framework around them, and that's what's really important, is you think about sport and the fact that you have referees, you have rules. We all understand what we should and shouldn't do on any of the sports that we play. What happens online right now? There is no rules, right? There's been no rules. It's just basically go out there and do whatever you like, even to a space in the esports space. And so we say, okay, no, what we need to do is actually bring them together, put some framework, regulation from the New Zealand Esport Federation and say, this is the rules. We get a teacher to look after them. They play from their school bay. It's free to jump into. And they have about 800 kids out there. And we went out there and did an event, and 450 of them play League of Legends. And it was just great to see some of them with the rugby boys. They said that they never really chatted to one another, and now they've got that commonality of basically being able to play League of Legends together, which is really great. So have a quick video for Mr. Van Goederwin.
Having an esports team at school has allowed these students to actually come together and find some pride in representing the school. And that's a big thing that we've had this year, that I've had students come up to me from the team and say, hey, this is the first year that I've been able to say, I represent my school. It's important that when we're looking at esports that we recognise that there is a future in this. And we're not just talking about that professional gaming. There is a huge range. I was speaking to some people in the industry, and they're talking about how esports and gaming is now something that can be valued, whereas it might have been something that in the past you didn't want to put on your CV.
Even in medicine, like brain surgery, they use controllers, they use cameras, they use operating systems to perform complicated surgeries and tasks that people can't just do by themselves.
I think the biggest thing in schools is that we need a competition, we need a table, we need somewhere where we can get focus on what they're doing and that it can be valued. And that's really what I'm looking forward to starting, working with other schools and just becoming big. In all honesty, I think within 5 years you will see that every school has an esports team, and that even though we're starting, this is something that is going to grow, and it's going to grow really quick.
And actually, having urged this audience to get involved with questions, we've got stacks of them. So
Great.
This is the bit where we'll channel some of that feeling in the questions. Because I don't want to send you on your way without being asked these questions, and we're nearly out of time for the afternoon. So can we go?
Absolutely,
Yep.
yeah, if you click the other ones up here, so click,
Yeah.
please.
So look, we just wanted to quickly run, because you're probably out there thinking, well, this is all great and good on it for you guys, but
They're
what does this mean?
not actually thinking that.
Oh, are they? Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, so click,
Well, should we just go straight through? Yeah.
Which is why I think getting to the questions would be good.
Okay, so look, perhaps this is where these questions are going, but these are all the ways that we think NSOs can interact with esports. So, there's obviously the Parallel E-League, that's easy. You can see that straight away. Yachting, by the way, just came out and announced they're going to have an E competition for yachting. The next one is selling the brand. So the Adelaide Crows, the Essendon Bombers have bought esports teams over in Australia. And that's not about promoting AFL as such, it's about promoting their brand as a club. You've got broadcasting, so the NFL is streaming on Twitch. So it's a way of getting your sport out there, and you can stream it online, and the startup costs are relatively low. Esports activations at major events, so some of the tennis competitions, for example, worldwide, Roland Garros, they had a thing set up where people could go in and they could play tennis, and sort of a Wii thing, and they could hit the ball and they could play against people. So that doesn't have to be just the sport that you're involved in, it might be another sport, just a way of getting people to come along. And then opportunities to grow your existing sponsorships. So you heard the commissioner of the NBA say, this is our 4th league. So he also went on to say, which you didn't see, about going to sponsors, he can say, well, I'm not just selling you exposure in 3 leagues, I'm selling you exposure in 4 leagues. And one of them has a demographic that you're never going to get to in the other 3 leagues. So you've got to think about it in that way. Right.
Questions. Right. Fair to say, there were a lot of questions, and the underlying message from a lot of the questions is that they do get it. They get the excitement. They get that this is competitive. They get this is what the kids are doing. But there is a general scepticism, I think, in a large part of the audience that just because it is competitive and just because the kids are doing it, that it is actually a sport. And around that, there's a number of questions. So say specific questions. Say with the high school league that you talked about and we saw the photo of the kids from, the boys from Tauranga. So what kind of protections are put in place for those high school participants? Because what we saw from the early videos is that, and I think anyone who's got teenage boys will know this, to get that good, you need to play for a long, long time. So in the initial video you talked about there were competitive players there who were talking about playing 18 hours straight. So what kind of protections do you put in place for the high schoolers?
You take us around the regulation?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. Well, we have regulations. We have put in place regulations in line with the IESF regulations. We do encourage very much a balanced lifestyle. The Federation is very much about amateur players, and so at that level certainly shouldn't be playing 16, 18 hours a day. That was talking about people who do this for a living. So there shouldn't be anyone out there doing that at the HSL level. So we're definitely putting in place safeguards to make sure that people are not abusing the system and not going overboard. But I guess like with anything, it's also, I guess, about parents doing that as well. We can't control when they leave school and go home. That's not something that can be controlled. So there does have to be some responsibility there. But it's certainly not something we encourage.
So one of the other questions relating to that actually was, you know, with some of these traditional sports, so the people in the room, when they're organising something that's involving high school students or younger students, but let's just stay with high schoolers, there's a whole regime of parents' permission slips and health and safety requirements and a whole lot of bureaucracy that sits behind it. Where is that in your sport?
It's there in exactly the same way. There are permission slips, there are discussions with teachers.
At the competitive level?
Sure.
But to get to that, I mean, a lot of the, if you talk about grassroots sports, it's there for the grassroots sports, for the people who are sitting in this room, but the grassroots level for your sport is my teenage son or somebody else's teenage son just playing fortune for a shitload of time, isn't it?
Yeah, so
you're all mic'd up. Everyone's
I'll move
mic'd
on
up.
with that. Look, so I guess one of the things is around the screen time, right, and where the regulation is for the high school league. So to your point around what do we do and how do we manage that, particularly if you look at the high school. So that's sort of what I didn't expand well enough on, I don't think, is the fact that at the moment, to your point around, you know, your teenage son or my son, he's at home, he's playing Fortnite, he's doing whatever he wants, right? Who looks after that? Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? So all we can do is go, well, that's happening. And so looking back a couple of years, what we did is we brought everyone in and we said, how do we control it? How do we actually help put some safeguards around it? Because otherwise you're going to have online bullying, you're going to have all these things that don't, that aren't good for the space. So what we did is we went out, we sent out a pack of which the NZESF regulate. We work with NetSafe, mental health, and they're obviously on board with the program. We go there just like any other sport, is what Ben's saying. We go there and we say, you need a teacher and you need to play from school, and then there's rules that sit around that. That's at the amateur level, so that's at the high school league level, and then all the way through. So we have the same safeguards as what you would expect from, I guess, a rugby match or a touch or basketball at a school level, and then we have permission slips that go out and say, can they play? So I think that might answer the question that we're sort of, we do have that available. Now, the one thing I would say though is if you look at competitive video game, you look at that space, and this is again a wider conversation, but I'm very passionate about it, like you said about your son and the Fortnite pieces. Right now you go to school and then you have all this gamification. Again, we've got to be honest, my kids are always sitting all the exams, everyone's got to have a laptop, they've got to have a tablet, and they're learning all the time on those devices. And so teachers kind of go, that's fine, mum and dad will teach you to do that at home. And you get home and then you're kind of going, well, we can do this, but who actually looks after that piece? Who kind of pulls all that online together and says, actually, who's controlling the space? Now, yes, we know, obviously, we're saying working with NetSafe, etc., but reality is we see esports as that vehicle where we can put some competitive rules around. We say competitive, saying this is how you should act online. And we hope that if we can educate the younger demographic, the ones coming through at a younger age, and it is getting younger and younger, that by the time they grow up and come into, you know, these sort of more professional or semi-professional tournaments, they know what's right and wrong, because at the moment that doesn't exist. And so I guess we are passionate about using esports for that vehicle.
All right, 2 quick questions, because there were these questions came up a lot from delegates. One was, it was kind of an assertion actually, but you can respond to it. And the assertion was that what you were showing the audience seemed to add to some of the challenges that traditional sport is trying to currently address. And the 3 things that the delegate identified were cost, the very maleness of esports from what we saw, and New Zealand's problem with childhood obesity. So tell us how would you respond to that challenge, that what your sport is doing is the very things that other sports are trying to address?
Well, I guess the reality is that, you know, that it is happening. Children are playing more games. So the question is, do we ignore that and somehow try and marginalise it and pretend it's not happening, or are we going to embrace it and regulate it and bring it back into the mainstream so that we can put regulations and safeguards in place? As far as obesity goes, look, absolutely, of course, that is a major problem. But like with anything, we try and promote a healthy lifestyle and say, you know, you should also be out there doing other stuff. We get professional athletes involved. We had the Warriors involved. We had the Breakers involved. There's people lining up to get involved. So we're also saying to them, look, these guys, they play gaming, because they all do in their downtime, just about, professional athletes. I just read Dan Carter's book, and he was saying that he didn't know what to do with himself on tour a lot of the time because everyone was either gaming or playing cards. That's what all these guys do in their downtime. So the message for those guys is, look, these are professional athletes, they game, but look what they also do. They also go and they train really, really hard. So you should also have a physical element to your life, without a doubt. Look, Duane and I were talking about it earlier. We're both carrying injuries from rugby, basketball, whatever, that are going to plague us later in our lives. And that's from playing traditional sports. So, you know, is there a time when people will say competitiveness should be online, but we keep fit in other ways? Whether you agree with that or not, that might be where we're headed. Concussion, that sort of stuff.
One other question, because this came up over and over and over again, and that was, you talked about inclusion, but overwhelmingly, the images you showed us were of male competitors, with the female participants, if we can call them participants, as being the equivalent of pit girls. It's 2018.
No, you're talking about cosplay?
Obviously, well, there was a question about cosplay, actually.
So cosplay, so let's...
But no, let's talk about the participation. Yep. I mean,
Sure.
all of the teams that you showed there wasn't a woman in any of those teams.
Yeah. Look, that is something that faces us for sure as an industry, as esports. So that's a great, a great point. Whoever brought that, probably multiple people. So we look at gaming as a whole, and the numbers that we get out of IGA, which is the most credible sort of group that will bring out the numbers. Average age of game, which I mentioned, was 34. And you look at the people who have access to a gaming device, it's 48% female, 52% male, right? So we look at that, the participation of gaming or having access to gaming is there already. And so the challenge we have is actually not around getting females into the space. They're already there. But we do have, like I think a lot of other sports, is getting into the competitive level. So when you look at esports globally, and the images there, you're dead right, there isn't enough females in there. Now that actually has nothing to do with the actual space. Like it's actually frowned upon, I'll get to that point actually, is females can come into it. It's accessible for them. They have as much ability as anyone else to come and play. So no one locks off those pathways. But again, everyone's trying to get them more and more involved. We don't know the solution, not here and not internationally, and that's what you see in that. So yes, it's from a competitive level, it's very heavily male. But again, accessibility is there for them. But when you're talking about the fact you're talking about cosplay or pit girls, actually, in actual fact, it's very much frowned upon. So cosplay is the extension of what they like to dress up on. It's actually something that's actually really celebrated in the space, just to let everyone know. So when you see them dressed up, though they may be scantily clad and those types of things, it's actually not about that. It's actually about them spending a lot of hours. You go to Armageddon, those things, you speak to a lot of the cosplay, of which I do in my business day to day. That's part of the gaming culture. Actually, what's frowned upon, and which is what you see at the biggest gaming expos, is actually what you said, pit girls, scantily clad girls, I guess what you call promo girls. It's wiped out. Gaming doesn't live with that. They think it's antiquated. No one likes that. You will not go to any of the expos across the globe and see that happening. They're very anti it because it's this young millennial space. So, like I said, don't be fooled by the appearance of them in cosplay. That's mirroring what they've seen in video games, but it's actually not sexualized in a way.
All right, you guys, we could talk all day because this is really interesting. We promised you a challenge and something else to think about. I think this session is definitely delivered. There will be a lot of conversation about this as the evening goes on. Thank you very much. It was a brave presentation, and Moana Lee's going to come and give you a traditional thank you.
Esports is certainly a place where our rangatahi love to be at. And I guess the challenge for us is how do we embrace this world in a safe way for future generations. And I guess one approach is that we start with open and we stay curious in this place, and maybe we allow rangatahi to lead us there. On behalf of Sport New Zealand and the conference, thank you, gentlemen, for opening up our minds to a world that we may not be familiar with. And also to a world that is growing, whether we like it or not, and is really acting for impact. Tēnā korua.